Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. During the previous night, both the Russians and the Ukrainians once again attacked each other using hundreds of drones. This map was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and according to them, the Ukrainians used 210 drones to attack deep inside of the territory of Russia. The Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation stated that just 95 drones were brought down by the Russians, so as you can see there is a very big gap. Anyway, as of the morning of the 7th of June of 2026, we haven't received anything on the matter of the Ukraine's attack. There were several reports from Crimea, there were several reports from Mariupol. Let's discuss them. According to information we have, the Ukrainians attacked the M18 road. They attacked this bridge that basically connects Crimea with the Kherson region. And as a result of attack, the Ukrainians managed to damage the bridge and the Russians were forced to stop traffic through this area. Obviously, this will intensify the fuel crisis that is currently taking place in this area. Furthermore, the sources reported that the Ukrainians attacked the Lenina oil refinery, which is located through the eastern part of Crimea. The Ukrainians attacked this object of energy infrastructure, and several sources reported that this morning a fire anomaly was recorded through this area. As of the morning of the 7th of June of 2026, we haven't received anything. I'm talking about videos or something like this that can confirm this fire anomaly. Another attack took place through the settlement of Mariupol. Today, pro-Ukrainian sources published this video, and here we can see how the Ukrainians these days were attacking different objects of military infrastructure in this area. And the Ukrainians attacked the Donetsk region. Lots of explosions were recorded through the settlement of Kherstivka. In this video, we can see another object of energy infrastructure that was destroyed on the territory of the settlement. The sources reported that the Ukrainians managed to damage probably fuel tank or something like this. And today we received another video from the settlement of Ust-Labinsk, if you remember, and I would like to remind you that yesterday the Ukrainians attacked this territory using dozens of drones, and we today receive additional updates about the situation in this area. We see that the firefighters are still trying to extinguish the fire, but it seems that the Russians will not be able to do this in coming days, or at least the fire will destroy everything in this area. So these videos we received from this area, as you can see, the Ukrainians managed to destroy several or damage significantly several fuel tanks in this area. And we said that the firefighters teams continue extinguishing the fire. So this is the situation with Ukraine's attack. So as you can see, nothing special. The same thing as we saw yesterday and the day before yesterday. The Ukrainians were attacking mainly objects of energy infrastructure and logistic roads, especially when talking about the bridge between Kherson and Crimea. This is a very, very dangerous situation. Once again, I would like to point attention that this will intensify additionally the fuel crisis that is currently taking place on the territory of Crimea. The Russians also attacked the territory of Ukraine using hundreds of drones, and this morning the Minister of Defense of Ukraine stated that the Russians used 236 drones to attack the territory of Ukraine, and we have lots of very interesting updates on this matter. Probably the most important update is coming from the former Chornobyl nuclear power station. Pro-Ukrainian sources stated that the Russians this morning struck the site of the centralized spent nuclear fuel storage facility at the Chornobyl nuclear power station. So this is a very interesting situation. We need to understand that the Russians are not going to destroy this facility or to create another disaster through Europe. The Russians are sending a very clear message. If you don't stop attacking the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant and its facilities, the Russians will continue attacking the Chernobyl nuclear power facility. So this is the message that the Russians are trying to send. I would like to remind you that currently the crisis around the Energodar oil refinery is intensifying, and so that is why the Russians are trying to send clear messages to the Ukrainians that they need to stop any provocations in this area. But at the same time, pro-Ukrainian sources made a very interesting statement today. Russia could launch launch a tactical nuclear strike on Ukraine to break through the front, the Rada stated. Syrskyi is aware of this and is taking it into account, stated Kostyantynivka, secretary of the Verkhovna Rada Defense Committee. Tactical nuclear weapons are necessary to break through the front line and gain operational space. Tactical nuclear weapons can cause damage over an area of 5 to 5 or 10 to 10 kilometers, which would be sufficient to introduce Russian troops into the bridge. So as you can see, all these things about the Chernobyl nuclear power station, about the Zaporozhye nuclear power station, and possible use of nuclear weapons by Russians are puzzles of the same picture, because we see that the Ukrainians most likely are not going to stop attacking the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, and it seems that the messages that the Russians are trying to send every day to the Ukrainians are not enough, which means that the Russians, if escalation around the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant continues, then most likely the Russians will consider this option in the future, but in a very, very far future. Now let's move further. The Russians during the previous nights also attacked the city of Odesa. During the previous night we received lots of updates on this matter. In this video we can see how the Ukrainians were repelling another attack carried out by Russians. The Russians were using hundreds of drones and the Ukraine air defense was at work, and at the same time, according to information we have, the Ukrainians intensified the construction of fortification through the Odesa region. The Ukrainians understand that the Russians are finishing the battle for Donbas. We see that Zelensky and Putin are not able to find compromises for a peaceful settlement of the conflict, so that is why the Ukrainians, Zelensky, Syrskyi, understand that most likely when the Russians finish the battle for the Donbas region, then most likely the Russians will consider an idea to begin offensive operation in the Zaporozhye region with the purpose to cut Ukraine from the Black Sea and from the most important logistic lines that the Ukrainians currently have. So that is why the Ukrainians are trying to intensify their defenses in this area with the purpose not to allow this to happen. Furthermore, the Russians continue attacking the logistics of the Ukrainian side. This day we start receiving more and more updates on this matter. As we can see, the Russians are mirroring everything that the Ukrainians do. I would like to remind you that the Ukrainians established complete control over the M14 road. These days we receive lots of updates from this area, how Ukrainians were attacking fuel trucks, gas stations, and so on. Now the Russians are trying to do the same thing, but through the territories along the line of combat contact deep inside of the Ukrainian controlled territory for 20, 30, 50 kilometers. Just yesterday, I would like to remind you that we received a video of how the Russians attacked several trucks and several engineering equipment in the area of the city of Arkhangelsk. So this is the moment, this is the fire that broke out right after the Russians attacked this territory. And here we can see the consequences of this attack. Another important thing is that these days pro-Ukrainian sources reported that the situation is becoming critical between the cities of Sumy and Kharkiv. The sources reported that Russia has taken control of the logistics network between Sumy and Kharkiv. This is the statement of advisor to the Ukrainian Defense Minister Sergei Beskertnov. In this video we can see dozens of vehicles that were destroyed by the Russians as a result of attacks between Sumy and Kharkiv, and the same thing as we see right now through Crimea and Kherson and Zaporozhye. The Russians are doing the same. They attack every single vehicle they see, and they will continue doing this. But at the same time, this is not just something that the Russians are trying to mirror or to do something similar that Ukrainians do through the M14 road. The Russians from the other side are trying to complete several to achieve several objectives. The Russians, as we may know, continue their offensive operation in the direction of the city of Sumy. Every day we receive updates on this matter. The Russians are advancing in the direction of the capital of this region, and as we discussed during the previous videos, the Sumy direction is one of the most important directions for Russians, because the Ukrainians use both Kharkiv, Sumy directions and Chernihiv direction to attack deep inside of the territory of Russia with hundreds of drones. So that is why this is a vital question for the Russians, to create a huge gap between the border and the territories where Ukrainians are able to use as launching sites for their drones. Another important thing, we continue receiving updates from the northern Sumy direction. These, during the previous 12 hours, as you can see, the map has been adjusted. This is the end of the 6th of June, and this is the beginning of the 7th of June of 2026. The Russians continue offensive operation towards the settlement of Ulanove. The Russians, as you can see, are trying to establish complete control over the pocket, over the MO2 pockets, and the Russians are trying to maintain the line probably along this red line on the map. And if it happens, of course, this means that the Russians will be able to create a strong foothold along the border. The question is whether the Russians from these positions are going to move further deep inside of the northern parts of the Sumy region, or the Russians will continue moving along the border in the northern direction with the purpose to create a buffer zone along the entire northern parts of the Sumy region. So this is the question, and we will understand this probably within the next several months. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Kharkiv direction. During the previous night, we also received lots of very interesting updates. The Russians continue their offensive operation in the direction of the settlement of Kazacha Lopan. Since the beginning of May of 2026, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly in this area. The Russians captured the settlements of Veterinarная, Granov, Shevchenka. We received a report about the settlement of Shevchenka just yesterday, and today several sources stated that first sabotage and reconnaissance groups and stormtroopers of the armed forces of the Russian Federation entered the northern parts of the settlement of Kazacha Lopan, and the Russians continue advancing. The settlement of Kazacha Lopan is a very important settlement through the northern Kharkiv direction, which can serve as a very powerful foothold for Russians before moving further in the direction of the settlements of Zolochev, Tsupivka, and of course in the direction of the settlement of Mali Prokhody. So the Russians right now are repeating their path that we used to see in 2022 during these first days of the special military operation, when the Russians were attacking in the direction of the city of Kharkiv from the north. The Kharkiv direction remains one of the most important directions for the Russians as well. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Kupyansk direction. During the previous night, small changes were recorded through the northern parts of the city, through the southern parts. Just yesterday, if you remember, we received this video where we can clearly see Russian soldiers, Russian troops that were moving through the city. According to pro-Russian sources, the Russian troops were securing the territory and checking whether everything is okay. This Russian soldier was recorded at several places, was geolocated several places yesterday. We adjusted the map yesterday based on this video, and today we receive additional changes. The Russians intensify their clashes for the settlement of Kupyansk-Uzlovoy, and despite the fact that we still haven't received complete reports that the Russians managed to secure the northern Kupyansk direction, we see that the Russians are moving in this direction, and the Russians almost every single day show and publish additional videos that allow us to adjust the map in the Russian favor. Now let's talk about the most important direction. This is the Slaviansk-Kostyantynivka direction, and during the previous 12 hours we received the most important updates about the situation in this area. And first let's talk about the Liman direction. This morning pro-Russian sources published this video, and here we can see how the Russian soldier was moving along the Ukrainsk Street 73, and here we have a Russian soldier that was moving along this road, and pro-Russian sources stated that he was also securing the territory and checking whether everything is okay. This is not a stormtrooper let's say, whose task is to storm buildings. His purpose was to move through the streets under control and under the view of FPV drone operator with the purpose to prepare this video. But we see that this Russian soldier is moving between buildings without being afraid of any attacks from the Ukrainian side. Yes, we don't see hundreds of Russian soldiers moving through these buildings, but obviously if there were hundreds of soldiers, then there would be thousands of drones that would attack these hundreds of soldiers. So that is why the Russians chose an option to use just a soldier, and he was moving through the eastern parts of the settlement, and based on this video we have adjusted the map. So these days we see that the battle for Liman has also intensified, and the most important thing is that there is a very interesting source in the internet, and he follows the situation in Liman, and he publishes every day, almost every day, the situation in this area. Of course, without proofs, but he says that he has connections with the soldiers on the ground, and he provides almost every day lots of interesting analysis about the situation in this area. And according to him, currently the Russians attack the city of Liman at least from 3 directions. So according to him, the Russians have already captured or secured or about to finish this process the most northern parts of the city. Furthermore, according to this source, the Russians right now are attacking through the eastern part of the settlement, and the Russians improved their position significantly till the 0527 road. So this is the second direction of attack, and according to the same source, the Russians right now are advancing in the direction of the settlement of Shurova, and as a result of offensive operation, the Russians managed to improve their positions also in this area significantly. So this is the situation in the Liman direction according to this source, and as you can see, the situation quite differs from the pictures that you might see through maps of different mappers. Anyway, according to this report, and of course if it's true, we see that the battle for the city of Liman is also coming to its logical end, and not just the battle for Liman is coming to its logical end, but also the battle for the city of Kostyantynivka. The only difference between the city of Kostyantynivka and Liman is that we receive a lot of updates about the situation of Kostyantynivka, and we don't receive almost anything from the settlement of Liman, but probably this is just the reason because of 2 different groups of forces are responsible for this. The group of forces south always publishes different updates about the situation on the ground, and the group of forces west doesn't publish anything. So the group of forces west doesn't publish anything about the Kupyansk direction. We have lots of reports in the past that haven't been confirmed yet, so too many difficulties. But as for this source, I think that this is the reality on the ground. The Liman defenses probably has collapsed, and the days of the Liman's defenses probably are numbered. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Kostyantynivka direction, and during the previous night we received significant changes, as you can see. So this is the situation by the end of the 5th of June. This is the end of the 6th of June. The Russians managed to encircle the most southeastern cauldron of the city of Kostyantynivka, and by the morning of the 7th of June of 2026 we see that almost the northwestern parts of the city of Kostyantynivka has almost completely collapsed. And as you can see, we have dozens of videos that confirm Russian positions through the southern parts of the city. Let's discuss them in details. Here we have a video that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and here in this video we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians through the southern parts of the city of Kostyantynivka with FPV drones. So during this video we have lots of episodes, and some of them were geolocated. For example, when talking about this video, the geolocations were recorded, and you can see the icons that were highlighted by a yellow circle. So these are the geolocations that were geolocated according to this video. The next video was published also by the same source probably, and here we have another video where we can see how Ukrainians were attacking edge positions of Russians. As for this video, also three positions were geolocated, and the most important video is coming from the most northern parts of the adjusted area. And here we have once again an FPV drone attack. Here we have a Russian soldier. Here we have FPV drone strike. And during this video also we have lots of episodes, and some of them were geolocated. So as you can see, the Russians have strong control over the southern parts. We have dozens of episodes, which means that there are maybe even hundreds, several hundreds of soldiers, maybe thousands of soldiers are already through the southern parts. We are not talking about that the Russians managed to establish something like a base, real logistic basic hub of the southern Kostyantynivka. No, we're just talking about a significant number of groups of forces that control the southern parts, and the Russians continue advancing in the northwestern direction. And these are the changes once again through the northwestern direction, and according to these changes, we see that the Russians currently control more than 60% of the city of Kostyantynivka, and there is a cauldron in the central part. So this is the situation in this area. The days for the city of Kostyantynivka as well as the days for the city of Liman are numbered, and as you can see, the Russians are about to finish these two flank battles almost at the same time, and most likely right after the end of the Battle of Kostyantynivka, the Russians will immediately begin offensive operation in the direction of the settlement of Alexeyevka-Drushkovka. And as for the Liman direction, right immediately after the end of the battle for this area, the Russians would try to attack the city of Slavyansk also through the villages and settlements along the river of Seversky Donets, and the main battle for the Slavyansk-Drushkovka agglomeration begins. And probably the main battle of the Donbas as well. And this is exactly what Zelensky was talking about when he was saying that the Russians will not be able to finish the battle for this agglomeration in 2020. But according to these latest reports, we see that the battle is about to start already. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction. These days we continue receiving lots of updates about the situation between the villages of Ivanovskaya and the settlement of Beryozove. So we are talking about these territories, and the situation is a bit very weird because pro-Russian sources are saying that the Russians right now continue offensive operation on the Ukrainian side of the river of Volcha. The Russians continue attempts to break through defenses and to attack both the settlement of Gavrilovka and Velika Mikhailovka basically from behind. So these are the reports that we receive from pro-Russian sources, but when talking about pro-Ukrainian sources, they draw a completely different picture. Pro-Ukrainian sources reported that during the previous days, the Ukrainians managed to break through Russia's defense in this area and to establish complete control over significant territories to the east and southeast of the villages of Gavrilovka and Velika Mikhailovka. So that is why it's very difficult to understand what exactly is happening in this area. We're waiting for additional updates, additional clarification. The only thing that's today, probably for the first time since this dual thing happened, has happened. The Russians published a report, and according to this report, the Ukrainians are doing the same thing in this area as they do right now through the northern Zaporozhye direction. They send hundreds of sabotage and reconnaissance pairs and groups deep inside of this territory just with the purpose to show immediate victory, to show videos with Ukrainians, let's say somewhere around Kamar, Fyodorovka, so as deep as possible, as far as possible from the line of combat contact, more than 10-20 kilometers, and to use these videos as proofs that the Ukrainians managed to break through these defenses. So, of course, let's wait and see how the things are going to develop, because sooner or later we will understand who's lying or who's telling the truth. We have covered most of the updates regarding the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, but the conflict on the territory of Ukraine is not the only conflict between Russia and the West today. Hot conflicts. It seems that another hot conflict is brewing, and today we're talking about the state of Armenia. Today is a very important date for this country, for this Caucasus country, because according to information we have, today the elections begins. Parliamentary elections are being held in Armenia today, with preliminary results showing Prime Minister Pashinyan party is the lead, 36%. If this trend continues, it will signal further consolidation of Armenia's course towards closer ties with the European Union and the United States, as well as gradual reduction of its dependence on Russia. At the same time, we received lots of very interesting updates. According to information we have, yesterday, Armenia arrested 6 pro-Russian opposition candidates. The day before the election, state media reported that the Central Electoral Commission authorized investigators to open criminal cases against the 6 candidates. Another important thing, that queues formed at the Yerevan airport due to the massive influx of Armenian citizens returning from abroad to vote in the parliamentary elections. So obviously today we'll see meetings, we'll see strikes, we'll see probably police, lots of police on the streets of Armenia. Today most likely the Russians would try to make a something like a coup with the purpose, of course, most likely due to arrests of pro-Russian candidates. There are very high chances that the Russians would not recognize the results of elections. So everything is possible. Everything is possible, and we need to understand one thing, that the Russians understand clearly that if they lose Armenia and if Armenia joins the European Union, most likely the Russians will not be able to return their influence ever in this area. So that is why it's not just a fight for a candidate between Russia and the West, like the fight that took place in Hungary or in Romania or somewhere else. This is the fight for basically the territory of Russian influence. So this is something like the second Ukraine. As of now, it's not the Ukraine of 2022, it's something like the Ukraine of 2014. So the moments when everything started with the revolution in Ukraine, in the capital, and so on. So now we can see the same thing, and most likely the crisis will intensify because Russians will not give up. And that's it for the short video. The Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye-bye.